She woke with a yawn and a stretch, her fingers brushing the empty half of the bed. No warmth. No pillow indent. No familiar scent. "Babe?" she called out, voice cracking in the quiet morning. No answer. She padded into the hallway, expecting to hear the creak of the coffee maker, maybe the muffled sound of sports radio humming from the garage. But the kitchen was cold. The garage? Empty. No truck in the driveway. No boots by the door. Something clawed at the back of her throat as she moved to the bathroom. No toothbrush. His razor? Gone. Even the soap he liked, the one she always made fun of for smelling like lumberjack cologne, was missing. And then she opened the closet. There was nothing. Not a jacket, not a belt, not even a loose sock or crumpled shirt. Just empty hangers spinning slowly in the draft of her disbelief. Her knees gave a little. Her voice was small. What the hell? There was no note. No warning. No trail. Just silence. And the terrifying realization. He was gone. And he wasn't coming back. But let's go back to the beginning of this amazing story. To the lies, the betrayal, the planning, the escape. To find out how it all started and how it all ended. You ever try to convince yourself you're imagining something, even when all the signs are right in front of you? That was me, sitting at the kitchen table late one Friday night, thumbing through a stack of bank statements with a lukewarm cup of coffee and a feeling I couldn't shake. It had been building for months. Quiet things, subtle shifts. Not the kind of trouble you can put your finger on, at least not right away. Just enough to make your stomach knot up and your brain lie to you. It started with the credit card. I only found out because my gas pump wouldn't accept it. Thought maybe the chip was bad or the station was just glitchy. But when I checked online, it had been canceled, maxed out, and shut down. That card had her name on it, too. And she'd been using it more than usual. Spa charges, rooftop bars, Uber rides at 2 a.m. things that didn't add up to the book club or girls' nights she claimed she was out for. I remember calling her that night just to ask what was going on. She laughed it off, said it was a mix-up, some billing error, nothing to worry about. I wanted to believe her. God knows I did. I've always been the kind of man who gives the benefit of the doubt. You don't build a marriage on suspicion. But then came the weekends. She used to love lazy Saturdays, cinnamon rolls, bare feet on the porch, teasing me about my truck always needing a wash. But suddenly, she started planning these weekend trips with her friends. I wasn't invited, and I didn't push it. Everyone needs space. At least that's what I told myself. But something about the way she packed bothered me. Little things. A dress I hadn't seen in years. Perfume she never wore for me. That one pair of heels she used to call too much for our small town. She'd leave on Friday morning and come back late Sunday night. Always tired, always half distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. She'd go straight to showering, sometimes twice, toss her clothes in the wash without a word. And one evening, as I picked up her coat from the chair, I caught a scent on it that stopped me cold. It was cologne. Not perfume, cologne. Deep, spicy, expensive. Something I'd never worn in my life. I stood there holding that coat for a long time, staring at the floor like it might offer answers. But nothing came. I told myself maybe it was from a hug. Maybe one of her friends was dating some city guy, and it rubbed off. You can explain anything if you want it badly enough. But my chest felt heavy in a way that wouldn't go away. I started noticing her phone habits. She used to leave it face up on the kitchen counter while she cooked, dancing to some pop playlist and humming out of tune. Now it was always face down, or glued to her hand like it was a lifeline. Notifications were off. Her password had changed. When I'd walk by, she'd tuck it under a cushion or angle it away, like I might be trying to read her mind through the glass. I didn't want to accuse her. Didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband reading too much into things. But it started to wear on me. I stopped sleeping well. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling fan, listening to her breathe beside me, wondering if she was dreaming of someone else. Once, I got up in the middle of the night and just sat in the living room in the dark, listening to the house creak. The silence felt like it was accusing me, like even the walls knew something I didn't. One night, she came back from one of her girls' trips and dropped her bag by the door. I bent down to move it, and the zipper wasn't quite closed. Inside, I saw a small velvet pouch, the kind cologne samples come in. It didn't have a label, just that same scent I'd smelled on her coat. I didn't say anything. I just closed the zipper and left it there. I think that was the moment I knew. Not just suspected, knew. And still, I said nothing. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe it makes me careful. I don't know. I just knew I had to be sure. A man like me, someone who works with his hands, saves for the future, doesn't have time for drama. You don't pull the pin unless you know the grenade's worth throwing. So I waited, and I watched. And in the stillness of that quiet kitchen, with papers spread out like puzzle pieces and her lies hanging in the air like smoke, I made myself a quiet promise. If she's playing me for a fool, she's not going to see the payback coming. Not in a million years. She said it was a girls' weekend in Vegas. Nothing out of the ordinary, just mimosas, spa days, some overpriced brunches. I even helped her pack. Folded up her favorite cardigan, found the travel charger she always forgets, zipped her suitcase while she double-checked her flight. I stood there in the driveway that morning, coffee in one hand, trying to smile as she pulled away in her friend's SUV. She blew me a kiss. I waved. Then I went inside and sat at the kitchen table and just stared at nothing for a long time. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I made a phone call. His name was Dwight, and he was recommended by an old co-worker who'd gone through something similar. Said he was a quiet guy, ex-military, didn't ask dumb questions, and didn't miss details. I met him in the back booth of a diner on the edge of town. He showed up with a notebook, a thermos of black coffee, and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice. Vegas, huh? He said, scratching at his stubble. That's a hot one. Easy to hide things in Vegas. Can you follow her? I asked. Just see what she's really doing? He didn't blink. Just nodded and said, 300. Covers the weekend. If it's more, I'll call you. I slid him a manila envelope with a recent photo of her, her itinerary, and cash I'd pulled out of an ATM an hour before. As he stood to leave, he looked at me and said, You sure you want to know? I didn't answer right away. I just looked down at the Formica table, 100 little scuffs in the surface like cracks in my peace of mind. Yeah, I said. I'm sure. The next 48 hours were some of the longest I've ever lived. I tried to keep busy. Changed the oil in the truck. Reorganized the garage, swept out the cobwebs, even mopped the floor like that would make time move faster. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. But Dwight never called. Sunday evening came, and she rolled back into the driveway just before sunset, smiling like she'd just been to church. Kissed me on the cheek, said the trip was exactly what she needed. I missed you, she added, eyes clear as glass. I just nodded and said, I'm glad. That night, after she went to bed early, I sat in my armchair and waited. Around midnight, the email came. No words, just a link to a drive folder. I clicked. It took a second for the photos to load, but once they did, there was no denying it. There she was, my wife, walking hand in hand through the Bellagio lobby with a man I'd never seen before. He had a name tag. He wore black slacks, white shirt, the whole waiter getup. Cocktail server. Probably half her age, too. Another shot showed them laughing at a rooftop bar, lights of the strip behind them. She had a drink in one hand, the other tucked around his waist like they'd known each other for years. Then a photo outside a show, her resting her head on his shoulder. And then the one that stuck in my throat. They were under a glowing pink arch in what looked like a garden outside one of those fancy hotels. His hand was on her cheek. She was smiling up at him like she was falling in love all over again. And on her left hand, plain as day, was the ring I gave her 12 years ago. Still on her finger. Still mine. But the woman in the photo didn't look like someone who remembered that. I closed the laptop slowly and just sat there. For a long while, I didn't move. The house was dead quiet, except for the sound of the old fridge humming and the tick of the second hand on the wall clock. I didn't feel rage. Not at first. It was more like a hollowness. Like the air had left the room. You think when this moment comes, if it ever does, you'll blow up, maybe punch a wall or shatter a glass. But I just sat there and stared at that screen, wondering how many times she'd looked at me the same way she looked at that stranger. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat out on the porch in the dark, listening to crickets and the distant sound of tires on the highway. She was just down the hall, maybe dreaming of Vegas and neon lights and that man's cologne. I watched the sky lighten behind the trees and made myself another cup of coffee. My hands didn't shake, but I knew something in me had changed. I couldn't pretend anymore. I knew the truth, and I'd never unknow it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even confront her. Instead, I sat with it. Let it harden. Let it turn into something colder than rage or resolve. The first thing I did was dig through every joint account we had. Bank, credit union, the online stuff, any place where my name was next to hers. I had a spreadsheet up, cross-referencing statements, watching the little digital trails she'd left behind. It was all there. Late-night Ubers, fancy restaurants, hotel charges tagged miscellaneous with no receipts. She wasn't even trying to hide it. But the real trick wasn't just knowing what she'd done. It was making sure she never saw what I was about to do. I started with the assets. There was the house, of course. Built it with my own hands, frame to finish, back when we still made plans together. There was my truck, my tools, the shed full of equipment I'd spent years collecting. Guns, 2 registered and legal. Some I hunted with, others I just kept clean and oiled like a man does with things that matter. I made a list of every item I owned that she might think she was entitled to, and I started moving them, piece by piece, to where she couldn't reach. The old rifle went to my cousin Bo in Kentucky. He owed me a favor from way back, and I trusted him. The gun safe followed a week later. I told her I was reorganizing the shed. She didn't blink. Next came the finances. I pulled every dollar I legally could from our shared accounts. Didn't drain them, not yet. Just siphoned enough to raise no alarms. That money went straight into a trust set up under my brother Wade's name. Wade's as clean as they come, owns a small engine repair shop, doesn't mess with drama, and knows how to keep his mouth shut. I talked to a lawyer downtown, paid in cash, told him I wanted to make my portion of our assets legally off limits. He nodded and said, "You're not the first fella to walk in here like this." We made the trust ironclad. Property I had before marriage, protected. Retirement savings in my name, tucked away behind legal walls. Any account she didn't know about became a ghost. Anything she might try to get her hands on went dark. Next, I closed the store credit cards she never used and opened new ones under a new name, linked to a P.O. box I set up in a neighboring town. I kept the statements paperless. No trail. I also sold off some of my collectibles, things she never cared about, but that were worth real money. A vintage coin collection from my grandfather brought in more than I expected. Some antique tools went to a buyer in Ohio who paid in straight cash. The titles on my motorcycle and boat trailer were signed over to a holding company my lawyer helped me set up. She wouldn't know what any of it meant until it was too late to ask. By the time I was done, everything valuable I had was either gone, sold, or legally shielded. I even canceled our streaming subscriptions, the landline she never used, and the pest control service. Not out of spite, but because I knew she wouldn't notice. And that was the whole point. She never once asked why I'd been coming home a little later or why I stopped making our Friday night dinners. She never noticed I'd stopped doing the laundry or that the garage shelves were looking emptier each week. She was too busy texting her new friend from Vegas, smiling at her phone like it was telling her secrets. Good. Let her stay distracted. Let her think I was stupid. That I was still standing in the same place she left me. Because by the time I was done, I was legally broke, emotionally distant, and entirely untraceable. Funny thing is, I didn't even recognize myself at first. I was always the type to believe in fairness. Hard work. Give what you want to get. But you live long enough, you learn that being fair in a fight you didn't start just makes you the loser. So I changed. Piece by piece, brick by brick. When a man like me decides to leave, he doesn't slam the door. He erases the whole damn house. When it came time to plan my exit, I didn't rush. I treated it the same way I'd approach rebuilding an engine. Slow, precise, no room for error. One bad bolt, one missed seal, and the whole thing blows up down the road. I wasn't about to blow this up. Every night, while she drifted off a few feet away, I sat in the living room with a pad and paper, drawing out my map like a man planning a heist. Not of money, not of gold, just freedom. First, I rented a moving truck under a fake name. Used cash at one of those self-serve kiosks a town over, where no one knew my face. Told them I was hauling antique furniture for my cousin's widow. They didn't care, and I didn't offer more. I kept the rental reserved for 2 weekends out, just enough time to clear the path and keep suspicions low. Next came the bank account. I'd done my research. Utah was a safe bet. Less paperwork, better privacy, and outside the immediate grasp of certain laws tied up with our home state. I drove 8 hours round trip to a branch that didn't know me and opened the account with a calm face and a steady handshake. Told the manager I was planning to relocate after some personal changes. He didn't pry. I deposited cash in small amounts to avoid flags, just enough each week to fill the new account without raising any eyebrows at home. Used a new mailing address. New phone. Everything quiet. Everything sealed. Back home, I started packing slowly, one small box at a time. Not with clothes or pictures, nothing obvious. just things that mattered to me and would be missed if they stayed. My dad's old workbench tools, a box of keepsakes from my grandfather's army days, my favorite coffee thermos, a handful of books with notes in the margins. Each item got packed and taped and moved to the corner of the garage, hidden under a tarp beside the snow tires. She never went out there anyway. I sold the rest, things I wouldn't need in the next life. Gave some to neighbors who thought I was just cleaning house. Downsizing, I told them. Trying to live simple. They nodded, not knowing how deep the truth ran. Then came the real question. Where do I go from here? I needed a place where no one cared who I was. Where nobody asked about your last name or your past. Somewhere a man could just be a man again, without his story being dragged behind him like a busted tailpipe. I started looking west. The coast was too crowded, and the cities had too many eyes. I searched small-town maps the old-fashioned way, paper atlas, diner napkin notes, word of mouth from truckers at gas stations. And then I found it. A little place in the mountains, out west, far enough from everything but not off the map. Population just over 1,000. No chain stores. No traffic lights. Folks still waved when you passed by. I called a number I found in the classifieds, some old man named Earl who handled rentals out of a hardware store he ran with his son. I got a cabin, he said, voice raspy like gravel. 1 bedroom, small shed out back, needs work. I asked if it had a fireplace. He said yes. That was enough for me. I wired the deposit that night. Used my new account. No paper trail she could follow. Gave a burner number, a fake last name, and told Earl I'd be arriving within the month. I ain't in no rush, he said. As long as the check clears. After that, every day became part of the countdown. Every grocery run, every coffee mug I washed, every dinner I didn't bother to cook became a step toward the door. At night, I sat in that quiet house and imagined the cabin, imagined myself fixing up the shed, building shelves for my tools, drinking coffee on the porch while the sun rose over trees instead of rooftops. I pictured peace, not just the kind you hear about in books, but the kind you feel in your bones when no one's lying to you anymore. She didn't notice the change in me. Or if she did, she thought it was indifference. She thought she'd broken me. But I wasn't broken. I was getting ready. It's funny how much you can disappear before you ever leave. How you can start removing pieces of yourself from a life while still sitting at the same table, smiling across the same plates. By the time I was done, I had everything I needed to vanish. Truck? Ready. Route? Planned. Cabin? Waiting. My heart? Quiet. And still, she had no idea. She was sleeping in a house that had already been emptied of me. She just hadn't figured it out yet. I left on a Tuesday. Not for any symbolic reason. Not to mark a date on the calendar. It was just the day when everything lined up. The weather was clear. The truck was fueled and packed. She was home late from some dinner with coworkers, which gave me the time I needed for one last sweep. She walked through the door laughing at something on her phone, barely glanced at me as she set down her purse and headed for the shower. I watched her go and realized, not for the first time, how far apart we'd grown. There was a time I knew everything about her favorite cereal, her tells when she was lying, the way she'd tap her foot when she was nervous. Now she felt like a stranger living in my house. Wearing my last name. I waited until she went to bed before moving. Quietly. Carefully. Most of the packing had already been done, piece by piece, over weeks of pretending everything was fine. But this was the final load, the things I'd need to start again. My tools came first. They weren't just for work. They were how I thought, how I solved problems, how I built the world around me. My wrenches, socket sets, hammers, the torque wrench my father gave me when I was 19, all of it went into the crate I'd reinforced myself and bolted shut in the bed of the truck. Then came the duffel. I didn't take much. A few shirts, some jeans, my leather jacket, socks, underwear, steel-toed boots, a couple of flannel button-downs. I had to force myself not to overpack. I wasn't going on a trip. I was starting a new life. Anything I didn't take, I was prepared to never see again. Last were the mementos. A photo of me and my old man fishing on Lake Lanier. A watch my grandfather wore every day until the day he passed. My dog tags from my short stint in the service. A Bible I hadn't opened in years, but couldn't throw away. And a little carved horse my niece gave me when she was 6. To keep you company, she'd said, back when I used to smile for real. I looked around the garage one last time, making sure nothing was left behind that I'd regret. It was strange, how empty it felt, but how light I did too. Like I'd already dropped half the weight off my shoulders. At 2:50 a.m., I started the truck. No headlights. just a soft rumble under the hood. The old Ford still purred like a lion when you treated her right. I'd done all the maintenance myself the week before, checked the belts, topped off the fluids, rotated the tires. She was ready. I walked back inside and stood in the doorway of the kitchen. The house was dark, quiet. It looked like any other morning, but everything was different. I'd wiped my prints off the drawer handles, left no dishes in the sink, even took the trash out. Habit, I guess. I wasn't trying to be clean for her. I just didn't want to leave a mess behind. I thought, for a second, about writing a note. Just a line. Maybe, you'll know why. But I didn't. She didn't deserve closure. She gave none to me. I stepped back out into the night and climbed into the cab. The air was cold, but not bitter. Just enough to remind you you're alive. At 3:01 a.m., I backed out of the driveway with the lights still off, eased past the mailbox, and turned down the street I'd lived on for over a decade. The neighborhood was asleep. Porches dark. Flags still, windless. I passed the Johnson's house. Mr. Johnson watered his lawn every morning like clockwork, 6:30 a.m. sharp. Wouldn't be long now. I passed the grocery store where I used to pick up her favorite ice cream. Drove by the hardware shop where I bought nails for our deck. Drove past our church, where we said forever in front of folks who thought they were watching something that'd last. And then it was just me and the road. No maps. No GPS. Just the highway stretching out like a ribbon into the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even feel scared. What I felt was gone. Not just leaving a house. Not just breaking off a marriage. Gone. Like a man walking out of his own skin. Like I'd been buried alive for years and finally dug my way to the surface. There was no plan to call her. No plan to check in, or look back, or leave breadcrumbs for her to follow. I was done with all of that. No note. No forwarding address. No warning. By the time she rolled out of bed and wandered into the kitchen to find the fridge half empty and the cabinets cleared, I was already halfway to nowhere. The sun was rising behind me, but I didn't look back. What waited ahead wasn't paradise. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, so was I. I knew it was coming before the paperwork even hit my new mailbox. She waited a couple of weeks, maybe to play it cool. Maybe she thought I'd call, beg to talk, grovel my way back into the house like a man who'd lost his head. Instead, what she got was silence. And that, I imagine, drove her nuts. So, right on schedule, she filed. Her lawyer sent the documents to the old address, probably thinking I was still within spitting distance. Took a bit longer to reach me, rerouted through my P.O. box out west. But once I opened the manila envelope and saw her name at the top, there it was, plain as daylight. Petition for divorce, list of demands, breakdown of equitable distribution. She wanted half. Half the house. Half the retirement. Alimony. Reimbursement for emotional hardship. She even listed the damn cookware. Said she should get to keep it because I never cooked. I sat there at the little table in my cabin, staring at her list like I was reading a comedy script. She thought she was about to cash in like she'd hit the Powerball. The problem? That jackpot was empty. By the time her lawyers ran my financials, I was as broke as a man could legally appear. No assets in my name. No home. No job with a W-2. Just a checking account that rarely had more than a few $100 in it, and a truck I'd borrowed indefinitely from an LLC I'd set up months earlier. She probably sat there at her lawyer's desk flipping through the documents, her mouth tightening more with every page. Where's the pension? What about the property? What do you mean the business was dissolved? There was nothing left to grab. On paper, I was just some down-on-his-luck fellow with a truck and a few shirts to his name. But that wasn't even the worst part for her. The worst part was what I handed over next. See, I hadn't forgotten about the PI. When Dwight sent me those photos from Vegas, I didn't just stare at them in heartbreak. I had them printed, stamped, cataloged, and dropped into a neat little folder with timestamps, location tags, and a full write-up of her activities during what she had called a healing retreat with friends. In my state, there's a little clause most folks don't know about marital waste. What it means is, if one spouse blows money during a separation on personal indulgences, especially if it's connected to an affair, the court can assign that debt to the person who did the wasting. Champagne rooms, hotel suites, rooftop dinners, spa treatments for two. She thought she was living it up. Turns out, she was building a receipt. I filed my response through a quiet lawyer I'd found out west. Straightforward man, silver hair, spoke like a retired sheriff and billed me less than I expected. He filed a counterclaim and submitted the PI's report as part of the evidence packet. Didn't even flinch. We didn't ask for damages. Didn't try to humiliate her. Just submitted the truth and let it sit. And the truth hit harder than any insult ever could. The next I heard from her lawyer, the tone had changed. Suddenly, they were open to negotiation. Suddenly, they wanted to amicably resolve the division of assets. Suddenly, there was talk about each party walking away with dignity. Dignity? She'd lost that in Vegas, somewhere between the second bottle of champagne and the third hotel keycard. In the end, the judge agreed. Ruled that her spending during our separation wasn't just careless, it was willful and in bad faith. The debt she racked up during her getaways was hers to carry. The assets she thought were still in play? Out of reach. The support payments she expected? Denied. She walked in expecting a payout. She walked out owing money. The cookware stayed with her. So did the house. But now the house had a second mortgage, and the cookware was heating up nothing but frozen dinners and microwave noodles. Funny thing is, I didn't gloat. I didn't raise a glass or dance in celebration. I just sat on my porch that night, the mountains turning gold in the dusk, and exhaled. The fight was over. She had played her hand and lost. And I didn't even have to raise my voice to win. I didn't go looking for updates, but small towns have long ears, and news finds its way across state lines without needing an invitation. It was one of those late evenings when I was changing out spark plugs in a 72 F100, just me and a socket wrench, and the kind of silence you only get when you live a mile from the nearest streetlight. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I don't pick up, but something told me to. "Hey, man," came a voice from the past. It was Jake, a mutual friend, or more like someone who used to be in both our lives back when cookouts still happened in our backyard and couples doubled up for long weekends at the lake. We hadn't spoken since the split. I half expected some kind of awkward small talk, maybe a favor being asked. But instead, he chuckled low, the kind of laugh a man gives when he's sitting on a story too good to keep to himself. You'll never guess who I saw bartending outside of Reno. I didn't have to guess. Turns out she was working the late shift at a roadside bar off Route 395. Not the glamorous kind with velvet booths and neon martinis. The kind with sticky floors, dollar bills stapled to the ceiling, and a jukebox that always seemed to be playing Merle Haggard or someone trying to sound like him. He said she looked tired. Not in the long day kind of way. In the way someone looks when life stops pretending it owes them anything. Hair tied back in a ponytail, makeup faded, eyes that didn't land on anyone for more than a second. No ring on her hand, of course. Just a cheap bracelet and a shirt one size too small, trying to sell the image of someone who still believed in better days. She didn't recognize me at first, Jake said. But when I said your name, she went quiet. Like you'd walked through the door. I didn't ask much more. Didn't need to. I could picture it clear as day. The dim light, the bottles lined up like soldiers behind her, the sound of laughter she wasn't part of. A woman who used to talk about opening her own business, about beach houses and brand new SUVs, now serving $2 drafts to long-haul truckers and off-duty mechanics. She had traded futures for short-term thrills. And in the end, the thrill didn't stick around. About a week after that call, I sat at my table and pulled out an old box from the shelf above the fireplace. It was the kind of box that held things too sharp to throw away but too dull to carry forward. Inside were letters, receipts, a photo or two I hadn't burned yet. And in the bottom corner, a pack of postcards I bought years ago on a trip we never took. One of them had a picture of the Welcome to Las Vegas sign. Bright reds, classic typeface, faded edges. I stared at it for a while. Not out of nostalgia. Just measuring the weight of a moment I'd been waiting for. I flipped it over. No, dear. Anything. No, sincerely. No name. Just 5 words, scratched in with a dull pen in blocky, crooked letters. House always wins, darling. No return address. No stamp traceable to my town. I mailed it from a rest stop 3 counties over, cash for postage, dropped in a bin with a handful of junk mail and diner coupons. She'd recognize the handwriting or she wouldn't. Either way, she'd read it. And she'd know. Not where I was. Not what I was doing. Just that I was still out here. Still living. Still free. And that after all the lies, after all the slick smiles and rehearsed denials, I was the one who'd walked away whole. People like to talk about revenge like it's fireworks, loud, dramatic, explosive. But the real kind? It's quiet. She thought she could outplay me. Thought I'd go down crying or screaming or begging for scraps of a life she'd already poisoned. Instead, I slipped out clean. Let the cards fall. Let her hold her hand of nothing while I took the pot. I don't hate her. That'd be too heavy to carry. I just don't think about her much anymore. But I hope that postcard finds her now and then, tucked in a drawer or wedged between old bills. Maybe when the bar is quiet and the jukebox dies, she pulls it out and reads those words again. House always wins. And she remembers, maybe for the first time in a long time, who really walked away winning. As for me, I landed in a town where no one cared what you used to be. Folks here wave when they drive past, ask how your day's going, and mean it. The kind of place where your name doesn't matter as much as how you treat people. That was fine by me. I rented a little cabin tucked between two ridges, gravel road winding up through pines so thick the wind whistles when it passes through. There's an old shed out back, half-rotten walls, rusted hinges, but solid bones. I patched the roof, reinforced the frame, and turned it into my workshop. Started buying up broken-down trucks from ranchers and retired farmers. Old Fords, Dodges, a few Chevys. Nothing fancy. Just honest steel with history under the hood. Most folks didn't want much for them, just wanted to know they'd be put to good use. I gave each one new life, rebuilt them part by part. Some I sold, some I kept. Made friends, too. Not the kind that need your life story. Guys I met at the feed store, at the diner, over greasy breakfast plates and mugs of coffee that never ran dry. Folks who helped me lift engines, who invited me to Sunday fish fries without asking where I came from. No drama, no lies. Just work, fresh air. The sound of my boots on dry leaves. The creak of the porch swing. Some nights I pour a little whiskey, sit out back, and watch the sun drop behind the mountain ridge. The sky turns gold, then purple, then black. Coyotes howl sometimes. Fireflies come out in waves. There's peace here, real peace. The kind you don't find unless you've had everything noisy stripped away. I lost a marriage. Gained my freedom. Fair trade. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have written on the postcard? If not, house always wins. If you like the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.